And so, as we make our way through, we can understand some cancers that develop in the integumentary system. The first one is going to be the one that's below here, and it's going to be called our basal cell carcinoma. And as a reminder, our basal cells are essentially the keratinocyte stem cells. These are the cells that, again, their sole responsibility is to create more keratinocytes. Their job is to undergo repeated mitosis to generate more and more daughter cells for our epidermis. And so another fact about them is that they originate in the stratum basal. They originate in that deepest layer, the deepest layer of our epidermis. And if overexposed to UV radiation and also some chemicals, they can become cancerous. And what cancer actually is that cancer is when the stem cells cannot stop dividing. It is essentially when cells just cannot stop undergoing mitosis. They can't stop going under prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. They just can't stop. And so typically the word that we hear associated with cancer is the word tumor. And so if we look at a tumor, this is an example of a tumor because it's a growth of a bunch of cells. They're just piling up, right? All these cells are going to the surface from the inner stratum basal. But over here, there's the stratum basal is undergoing repeated mitosis, those basal cells, producing too many keratinocytes, piling up on top of each other too much. And so the good news about this type of cancer, I guess that's a weird way to phrase that, but the good news is that most people survive it because it is growing towards a superficial direction. It is growing away from your body. The word that matters here is this word metastasis. And what this word means simply is when cancer cells, like a basal cell, divided so much that it actually made its way and created or found its way into the blood vessels. And now the blood vessels transport a cancerous cell throughout your entire body. And now it can grow on another part of your body because, again, it can't stop dividing. And so it'll start doing the same thing, just undergoing mitosis somewhere else on your body. And so that's what the word metastasis or metastasize imply. And so it's when cancer spreads to other sites from where it originated. And you survive it because it grows away superficially. So most people survive it. You typically get a small surgery to remove it just in case, and then they kind of just put these sides, these edges together, and then your cell repairs itself pretty well after that. Your tissue, pardon. And now, in the case of malignant melanoma, a little bit different, and we're going to have to go to the next page to understand it a little bit better. And so, first, we have to understand what melanocytes do. Melanin. When we think about light or sunlight, keep in mind that sunlight overall is going to possess all the colors that exist. They include red, yellow, and I guess I'll use my camera for this. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to understand what it is I'm talking about. And since this is recording, because this is recording and now you're on there forever, is that when you look at a color, right, or light in general, as you look at the light bulbs, the sunlight, what it's doing is that it's shooting white light towards everything. And what white light is that it includes every single color you've ever seen in your entire life. Greens, blues, browns, purples, yellows, and all those colors are within white. They're just this, all of them are traveling at the same time, just like this, you're seeing in this white pen. And so light is hitting everything on the surface, right? It's hitting my sweater, it's hitting that cubby, it's hitting this here, right? If I turn off the lights, it gets black and dark. You can't see any of these structures. So now, when sunlight or light is being shot, it's shooting white light, and what's going on, or what a pigment is that a pigment is absorbing colors. So this white light containing all the colors is hitting this. The pigment that this cover has, it absorbs every color all the greens, all the purples, all the oranges, reds. It's absorbing all of them except the one that you're seeing. So white light containing all the colors, all the colors, all the colors, all the colors get absorbed except blue. Blue gets reflected right back at you. So you're seeing blue because white light is being absorbed and blue is being sent back. And so when you're even looking at white, you are actually seeing multiple colors being reflected back at you. This white light is hitting this pigment, and this pigment is reflecting right back at you. Orange, red, blue, purple, all the colors. This one's only reflecting brown, and this one's only reflecting red right back at you. And so reflecting red right back at you. Sorry, it shouldn't be showing anything. And then I just don't know how to shut that off. And then so here, reflecting red right back at you, but white light hits it and reflects only red right back at you. So with that in mind, back to what we're talking about, is that UV light contains essentially all the colors, right? It contains white light. And so what you possess inside of your epidermis are these little resident cells called melanocytes. Melanocytes, they have these large extensions, and what they do is that they release vesicles containing a pigment called melanin. And this pigment melanin, it absorbs light. It is very dark. And now to finish sort of our little story around white light, black light, when you see darkness or black in general, I guess this is the blackest thing I'm going to be able to show you right now, or like my sweater, the one I was wearing. This black light, or when you see something black, or even like your tables, white light is hitting it, and it's absorbing all the colors. All the colors go into it, and what you're seeing when you look at black is the absence of color, the absence of light, because it is absorbing all that light. And so dark pigments are there to help you with absorbing that light so that that light doesn't make its way to the basal cells. Remember that the basal cells are found in the stratum basal. That stratum basal is the deepest layer. It is also found next to the basement membrane. Remember, they have a lot of hemidesmosomes. They're linked down to that basement membrane. And so these melanocytes send out these vesicles with melanin to prevent light from affecting our basal cells and causing them to become cancerous. And so here, melanin is the name of the pigment. Melanocytes are the names of the cells found in that stratum basal. And then the vesicles, they package vesicles of melanin in melanosomes, right? The key word there is melanin and melanocytes and melanosomes. There's even a hormone that in the endocrine called melanocyte stimulating hormone, which stimulates them to release and create melanosomes and melanin. And then there's also another pigment that can be found within that gets fused, or I should say actually before I get into that, is that you can see this little vesicle. It releases melanin in the cells, but these vesicles can go through the plasma membrane, and then they can drop off the melanin in the keratinocytes inside of them. And then carotene is another pigment, the little orange one that you're seeing here, that is also found in keratinocytes. And so if we step back to our malignant melanoma, right? All of this is implying melanin, melanosomes, melanocytes. This is a cancer of your melanocytes. And so now, when we talk about these words now, melanocytes, because of the danger of where they originate, right? They are here, kicking it right here in the stratum basal, very close to the basement membrane, very close to the dermis, where there are capillaries. And also, melanocytes actually don't even originate from in this layer. They actually originate from the dermis. And so if a melanocyte lives in your dermis, and we know that there are capillaries and blood vessels within the dermis, then there is the danger that a melanocyte will enter circulation, either there or through your lymphatic vessels, discussed a little bit later. But if they get into the circulation of the rest of your body, then they can spread through your body. So when you see a pigment of growth, you are more than likely seeing you are seeing melanocytes that are cancerous. Malignant means that it hasn't or it isn't spreading yet. However, they do have a danger of spreading, and then they can, again, metastasize. So that's why they grow so rapidly that they can enter through the lymphatic system. Remember, our lymphatic system is a series of blood vessels responsible for the flow or regulation of tissue fluid, and it's found everywhere. And we'll discuss it more in detail up close a little bit later. But then, now this cancer, if it's detected early enough, the 5-year survival rate is nearly 99%, right? Probably even 100%, but nobody wants to get sued, so nobody says that. And then here, if we say here, when we look at this one, for the 5-year survival rate drops to 14% if not detected early, because of the danger of that it can metastasize. It can spread throughout the body. So when you see a pigmented growth, you might want to go get that checked. And so, last thing to finish on our topic of skin coloration, is that blood supply can also affect the color of skin. We saw early on in our slice of, the integumentary system where we see all those structures, there was a braid of blood vessels underneath the papillary layer called subpapillary plexus. And when you compress or you press your fingertips, you can even see that the color changes from a pale to a red. And that's because you're sort of pushing the blood out away from those capillaries. And then when you let go, it fills up with blood once more. And so typically, less blood flow to an area results in a pale color. More blood flow results in a redder color. And this can be used in the diagnosis of particular symptoms, or they could be considered symptoms of particular conditions. And it just really depends. You can tell someone's in shock because of the pale color. You can tell their sympathetic system's activated because blood gets drawn away from your hands get cold, things like that. And then you can also see a bluish color called cyanosis when there's decreased oxygen levels, when hemoglobin doesn't have any oxygen to be bound to. And so cyanosis is another color you can see, pale, red, or a shade of blue. All right. And so the dermis, everything that we needed to be said was essentially said. We have to just sort of go into structures embedded within the dermis. But to summarize our dermis is made of 2 layers, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The papillary layer is going to be made up of areolar tissue, which once more is made by fibroblasts. It's a very loose connective tissue that allows white blood cells to live with the fibroblasts and fibrocytes. They also contain capillaries, lymphatic vessels. Remember that lymphatic vessels regulate tissue fluids. You know this word as interstitial fluid or ground substance from previous lectures. And then it also contains nervous tissue called sensory neurons. Which is the next topic. The reticular layer is going to possess a bunch of irregular tissue, which is also considered a dense tissue. It's made by fibroblasts and maintained by fibrocytes, and they secrete collagen and a little bit of elastic fibers, which contribute to the stretchiness of the dermis. And they possess a lot of structures embedded within it. The ones that matter for us are hair follicles, sweat glands, and then the repeated ones that just didn't really feel like it's worth it, but just in case, blood vessels, nerves, and that in our accessory organs, which are again hair and sweat glands. So as we make our way, now putting it all together before we move on, the epidermis is going to possess the 5 layers of skin. Come, let's get sunburnt. But in thin skin, we do not have lucidum. That is only going to be on the epidermis. The dermis, the papillary layer, and the reticular layer. And don't forget your hypodermis or subcutaneous layer is going to be pretty much just adipose tissue located in those spots. And now for our nerves to end this session, this video. When we look at sensory receptors, the sense in question is our sense of touch. Your entire skin comes loaded with a bunch of nerve fibers connected to hair. And this is why when you pluck a hair, it hurts. And the ones that are discussed on this page, we'll discuss the hair ones after, but we are separated into 2. The free nerve endings and the tactile discs are part of the epidermis. The next 3 are found in the dermis. And so we're going to keep it very simple. Our free nerve endings and tactile discs are found in the epidermis. If we look at what a free nerve ending looks like, a free nerve ending has these long extensions into the dermis, so when there's contact against the skin, then it pushes down these dead cells, and then it knows it's pushing something. It knows the texture of something. Right? Because it, depending on how hard a material is or how, your skin cells are pushed differently. And so they send signals into the brain. And so our free nerve endings are sensitive to just touch. That's all I really have here for free nerve endings. Keep it simple. And then we have our tactile discs, which can detect texture. And we're going to have to edit our slide here. This is incorrect. Tactile discs. And they detect texture. And if you're not sure what texture is, think about like material for clothes. You have soft fabric, right? And then you have something that could be like hay or straw, right? Or something, and hard, tough fabrics, I guess. Think about that, like a soft blanket and then a blanket that's like, why even own it? You know what I mean? You've all stayed in somebody's house at some point. Tough fabric. And then you can see they are also located within that epidermis, right? They are invading or innervating that space. Remember, the word innervate means to serve an area, serve a space. And there's your free nerve endings here. All right, next, our dermis ones. We have the Meissner corpuscles, which are also called tactile. This is the scientist who found them, I believe. But the appropriate name is tactile because it sort of tells you what they do, is that they detect light touch. And I really want you to think of this as also fine touch, which is kind of undistinguishable from just detecting texture. Because when you think about what they're for, if I were to put dimes and pennies in your pocket, without looking at it, you would be able to detect and determine which one's which. And so that's because of these. Even if you look at our photo where they're located, you can see that they're located incredibly close to the epidermis. And so you can see here are tactile or Meissner corpuscles, that they are found in the dermis. They are located within the dermal papillae. That's their main site of location, very close to the epidermis. And here, I don't know if you've ever seen me use this before, but usually when I use it, it means therefore. So located in dermal papillae, therefore can detect what's on the epidermis of skin, right? They can detect what's going on very lightly on that skin. If you compare it to our next one, are lamellar corpuscles, or traditionally called Pacinian. They're deeper in the dermis. So deeper, or let this P of Pacinian should remind you of pressure. They got to be pushed a little bit hard to be activated, to detect anything. If we use our illustration, you can see that they're located way further down into the dermis. So you'd have to put more pressure on these keratinocytes, more pressure here, more pressure on the fibroblasts that exist in the areolar tissue, and then finally you put enough fibroblast pressure, right, pressure on all the content there, it'll activate or send the signal to the brain that it's being pushed, that you're being pushed kind of hard, right? You touch this lightly, it knows. You push this lightly, these don't get touched or activated, but you push it hard enough, then it gets activated. That's how it knows pressure, or that deeper pressure is being applied. And then the last one we have is called the bulbous corpuscles, or the Ruffini ones, and they detect stretching of the skin. Remember that the irregular one, if someone's pulling your cheeks right when you're a kid and they're like, oh, you're so cute, and they pull your cheeks and it hurts and whatever, and it's uncomfortable, and that's because they are activating your Ruffini corpuscles. These are embedded next to a lot of the smooth muscles that are there from the erector pili muscles, or they're just attached to a bunch of collagen fibers. And so when you stretch the skin, in the case of someone pinching your cheeks, right, they pulling on your skin, then they're detecting that stretch, and then they let your brain know that your skin is being stretched. And so we have that same highlight here. And so the third video will continue from this page.